All right. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to introduce the people to my left that I'm joined here by today. Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart, Cook County Sheriff Police Chief Leo Schmitz, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox, ATF Chicago Field Division Special Agent in Charge Chris Amon, and Deputy Mayor of Community Safety Gary Gatewood. I'd also like to introduce our Chief of Detectives Antoinette City, along with the Area 1 Detective Division and the Investigative Response Team. We're here this morning to announce charges against the man that shot and killed an off-duty Cook County Sheriff's Deputy, Rafael Wordlaw. This was during an attempted robbery. 32-year-old Cordarrow Thompson, a convicted felon and registered gun offender, is charged with multiple felonies, including first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, attempted armed robbery with a firearm, murder with a strong probability of death or injury, murder with other forcible felony, aggravated battery with discharge of a firearm, and unlawful use of weapon by a felon. First off, I'd like to extend my support to the family of Deputy Wordlaw. The family has to be seriously grieving right now. From what I've heard and what I've learned about Deputy Wordlaw is that he was a dedicated family man, would help anyone that he could, and he was devoted to his job. I also want to offer my support to Sheriff Dart and to the entire Cook County Sheriff's Department. Losing one of your own is never easy. It's also worse when you know that you've lost someone to senseless gun violence. We've seen this all too often. Deputy Wordlaw should have been celebrating his 32nd birthday next week. Instead, his family is now dealing with the loss of a loved one. I cannot say enough to bring some type of sense to this type of violence to the family of this deputy. The family really has to be grieving through this type of event, and please just keep that family in your prayers. This is very frustrating. It's frustrating to see this type of violence across the city in general. Obviously, this was an individual who dedicated his life to public service, and we lost this individual. And there are people across the city as a whole who are dealing with the same types of losses. It's senseless, and it has got to stop. We honor Deputy Wordlaw by bringing his killer to justice. We want to make sure that this individual cannot destroy another life or lives, because even if it's one life that's taken, it affects the lives of everyone who knows that individual. It has a ripple effect. Hopefully we can bring the family some level of justice with what we've done here today. I want to thank the Area 1 detectives and the Investigative Response Team for this swift response. What I can tell you about the Area 1 Detective Division, just like our detectives as a whole, led by Chief Antoinette City, is that they work their fingers to the bone, not only in a case like this, but in every single case that they can, to try to bring some type of justice to families who have suffered a loss. I cannot say enough about the work that was done by the Chicago Police Department and our Detective Division. But again, we did not do this alone. I have to thank Special Agent in Charge Chris Amon, and his team at the ATF, Chicago Field Division, and the team at the Crime Gun Intelligence Center, who played a crucial role in making sure that this offender was held accountable. Working in partnership with our federal partners was very helpful in helping us get here. I'd also like to thank Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx for a partnership in securing charges with this offender. I've stood here on several occasions with the Cook County State's Attorney Foxx, who has worked well with us in cases like this and trying to bring justice to these families. We have to do something about this violence, and I'd like to thank State's Attorney Kim Foxx for the partnership here. It is important for everyone to understand that moving forward, we will continue to work in the manner that we're working right now to try to keep this city safe and to try to bring justice to families who have suffered losses and have lost family members to all types of violence, not just gun violence. We've got to bring the violence down in the city, and we've got to start talking about ways to get that done. Cooperation with our partners, cooperation with our community members is going to help us get there.
August 2nd, 2024. It was a warm summer night in Chicago. The kind of night where the city seems to breathe just a little slower. Streetlights reflected off car roofs, casting long shadows over quiet corners of the South Side. In the Woodlawn neighborhood, tucked between faded storefronts and corner gas stations, a man stopped to refuel his vehicle. He wasn't on duty. There was no active call. No sirens. Just a quick stop on the way home, something any of us might do without thinking twice. That man was 37-year-old Rafael Wordlaw. A deputy with the Cook County Sheriff's Office. A father. A protector. Someone known for his calm demeanor and commitment to public service. He had served his community for years, navigating one of America's toughest cities with discipline and heart. But that night, just before midnight, the ordinary turned violent. Out of the shadows came another man. Cordarrow Thompson. 32 years old. A 5-time convicted felon with a long history of violent crime. He wasn't just walking past. He wasn't looking for gas. He came with intent, armed, prepared, and dangerous. In a matter of seconds, a confrontation erupted. The silence of the night was shattered by a hail of gunfire. 69 shots rang out, a staggering burst of violence. Thompson, firing with both hands, emptied round after round in a ruthless ambush. Deputy Wordlaw fired once, a single shot that struck its mark, but it wasn't enough to stop the onslaught. When the smoke cleared, Deputy Wordlaw lay wounded. Critically injured. He was rushed to a nearby hospital, but the damage had been done. He didn't make it. The city lost one of its own that night. And a familiar, painful question echoed once again through the streets of Chicago. How does a man with 5 felony convictions walk freely among us? How does someone so deeply embedded in the system's failures still find access to weapons, and the will to kill? And what does this say about the cost of violence, not just in Chicago, but across a country grappling with broken cycles of crime and justice? This is the story of Deputy Rafael Wordlaw. A man who lived to protect, and died doing the same. A story of bravery, of loss, and of a justice system with cracks wide enough to cost a good man his life. Before we dive deeper into today's chilling case, we want to take a moment to engage with you, our viewers. If you find our stories impactful and want to help support the growth of our channel, please take a second to subscribe. Subscribing ensures that you're always updated with our latest content, and it helps us reach a larger audience, allowing us to continue bringing you fresh crime stories and detailed analyses every day. We genuinely value your thoughts, so feel free to leave your comments below. Share your views on this case, and don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see how far our stories reach. By liking, sharing, and commenting on our videos, you play an essential role in expanding this community and raising awareness. Your participation makes a difference. Thank you for being part of this journey. Now, let's continue with the story. Rafael Wordlaw wasn't just a badge number. He wasn't just a uniform, or a statistic, or another name in a headline. He was a man. A son. A brother. A friend. A deputy. At 37 years old, Rafael had built a life around purpose. He served with the Cook County Sheriff's Office, one of the largest sheriff's departments in the nation, tasked with protecting a city where danger can come fast and unpredictably. But even in that pressure, Rafael stood out. He was the kind of officer who didn't just show up, he was present. Fully. Professional. Dependable. Quietly respected by his peers, and deeply trusted. He didn't seek attention, but his actions often spoke louder than words. His calm under pressure, his consistency on the job, these were the things fellow deputies remembered. In the words of one colleague, he was the kind of cop you'd want watching your back. And that wasn't just a figure of speech. Rafael had built a reputation over the years as someone who took his responsibilities seriously, both on duty and off. He understood that being a peace officer wasn't something you turned off when the shift ended. It was a mindset. A lifestyle. A commitment. That's why, even while off duty on the night of August 2nd, he was still carrying his service weapon. Not out of paranoia. But out of awareness. Responsibility. A deep understanding of the world he lived in, and the dangers that sometimes came with it, even when you were just stopping for gas. Those who knew Rafael described him as disciplined, but kind. Private, but warm. A man with integrity. Not perfect, but steady. And in law enforcement, that means something. Behind the badge, Rafael was a regular man with a life many never saw. He had dreams, obligations, people who loved him. He wore the weight of the job with quiet pride. And though he never sought to be a hero, in the end, that's exactly what he became. His story is not just about how he died, but how he lived. And how his life, his presence, left a mark that those around him won't forget. Cordarrow Thompson was no stranger to the system. At 32 years old, he had already racked up 5 felony convictions, a history that should have, by most standards, made him a name well known to law enforcement. Assault, weapons violations, and repeated confrontations with the law painted the picture of a man caught in a cycle of crime that never quite broke. His record didn't suggest a one-time mistake or youthful misstep. It reflected something deeper, a pattern. An individual who, despite facing multiple convictions, continued to find his way back onto the streets. And yet, he was out. Free. Roaming neighborhoods like Woodlawn. Carrying firearms he was legally barred from owning. Living in the gaps between enforcement and reform, the very cracks in the system that so often prove fatal. Thompson's past includes incidents tied to armed robbery, gun possession, and violent altercations. These weren't just petty crimes or non-violent offenses. They were serious charges that, on paper, should have kept him from acquiring another weapon, let alone 2. But somehow, despite his record, he did. It's a question that haunts stories like this. How does a man with 5 felony convictions walk freely into a neighborhood with firearms in hand? How does someone with such a violent history slip past the safeguards meant to prevent exactly this? It isn't just a question about one man's choices, it's about a system that struggles to enforce its own limits. A system that punishes but rarely rehabilitates. That releases but fails to monitor. That reacts, but doesn't always prevent. Thompson wasn't under surveillance. He wasn't being tracked. There was no red flag raised as he moved through the city with deadly intent. And when he approached Deputy Wordlaw that night, it wasn't as a desperate man acting on impulse. It was as a repeat offender who had learned how to survive, and how to slip past the consequences, time and time again. His actions weren't just criminal, they were calculated. 2 guns. 69 rounds. A brutal show of firepower. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was something darker. A moment that showed just how vulnerable even the most prepared officer can be, when the wrong person slips through the cracks. And the cost, this time, was a life. It was just before midnight on August 2, 2024, when Deputy Rafael Wordlaw pulled into a gas station in Chicago's Woodlawn neighborhood. He wasn't responding to a call. He wasn't in uniform. He was off duty, a regular citizen in that moment. Doing something simple. Routine. He parked his vehicle, stepped out, and began to pump gas. But lurking nearby was a man with no intention of minding his own business. Cordarrow Thompson was already there, watching, waiting. Armed with 2 handguns, both illegally obtained, and both loaded. The moment was planned. Calculated. Wordlaw didn't know it, but he was being sized up, not just as a target of opportunity, but as a man who posed a threat. And then, in a flash, it began. Thompson approached, fast, aggressive, weapon in hand. Witnesses would later describe it as a robbery attempt. A sudden demand. A confrontation that escalated in seconds. But Rafael Wordlaw wasn't an average citizen. Even off-duty, his instincts were sharp. His training kicked in. He reached for his firearm, the same one he carried every day on the job. The same one he hoped he'd never have to use that night. In the chaos that followed, both men drew their weapons. But Thompson was already firing. Holding a gun in each hand, he unleashed a terrifying burst of violence, a rapid spray of bullets that shattered the silence of the neighborhood. 69 shots in total. Fired within seconds. An overwhelming, brutal show of force. Wordlaw managed to fire a single round. Just one. But it found its mark, striking Thompson in the leg. A testament to his focus, even under unimaginable pressure. But it wasn't enough. One of Thompson's bullets tore through Wordlaw's chest. The wound was devastating. And though emergency responders arrived quickly, and he was rushed to the hospital, there was little they could do. Rafael Wordlaw, a seasoned deputy who had survived years on Chicago's streets, was gone. In less than a minute, a career of service was ended. A family's world shattered. And a community reminded, once again, of just how fast violence can find even the most prepared among us. The gas station became a crime scene. Shell casings scattered the ground. The number of rounds fired stunned even veteran officers. 69 shots, from a man who never should have had one gun, let alone 2. And at the center of it all, the tragic loss of a deputy who died the way he lived, ready to protect, even in his final moments. The scene at the gas station was chaotic in the minutes following the shooting. First responders arrived quickly. Flashing lights lit up the corner of East 63rd Street as paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Deputy Rafael Wordlaw. He was still alive when they lifted him into the ambulance, his badge still with him, his firearm by his side. There was hope, if only for a moment. But at the hospital, that hope faded. Despite every effort, Deputy Wordlaw was pronounced dead from a gunshot wound to the chest. The bullet had done irreparable damage. And just like that, the Cook County Sheriff's Office lost one of its own. Word of his death spread quickly, across police radios, across department group chats, across the city. Another officer down. Another family shattered. Another name added to a growing list of those lost in the line of duty. Meanwhile, Cordarrow Thompson, wounded in the leg by Wordlaw's single shot, had fled the scene. But not far. He was located and taken into custody shortly afterward. Officers secured both weapons, and Thompson was transported to the hospital for treatment before being transferred to police custody. The charges came swiftly. First-degree murder. Aggravated unlawful use of a weapon by a felon. Attempted armed robbery. A list of charges that reflected not just the act itself, but the long trail of violence that led up to it. At a press conference the following day, police officials stood solemnly behind a podium. Their faces said what their words couldn't. A life had been taken. A protector had been lost. The sheriff's office called Deputy Wordlaw a dedicated public servant, and vowed that justice would be pursued with full force. The mayor issued a statement condemning the violence and extending condolences to Wordlaw's family. But behind the formal language was a familiar fatigue. Another city leader forced to grieve in front of cameras, yet again. Online, the public reaction was swift and raw. Outrage. Anger. Grief. People questioned how a man with 5 felony convictions was walking the streets at all, let alone armed and dangerous. Social media filled with tributes. Photos of Wordlaw in uniform circulated, accompanied by hashtags calling for accountability, justice, and reform. And in the days that followed, something else happened. The community showed up. Vigils were held outside the gas station where Wordlaw fell. Candles lined the curb. Flowers were laid. Fellow officers, friends, and residents stood side by side, some in silence, others sharing stories, most still struggling to believe what had happened. There were no easy answers. No clean resolution. Just the loss of a man who had lived with honor, and the growing awareness that his death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a symptom. A reflection of a deeper, more complicated problem woven into the justice system itself. A system that allowed a known felon to carry out a brutal ambush. A system now scrambling to answer for it. The shooting of Deputy Rafael Wordlaw didn't happen in a vacuum. It wasn't an isolated event, and it wasn't without warning signs. It was the tragic outcome of a long, slow failure, one with roots deeper than a single night or a single man. The question that surfaced almost immediately was one both simple and damning. How did Cordarrow Thompson get guns? He was a convicted felon, 5 times over. By law, he wasn't allowed to purchase, possess, or carry a firearm. And yet, on August 2nd, he walked into a Chicago gas station with 2 handguns. Loaded. Ready. Not in spite of the law, but in defiance of it. Did someone sell them to him? Did he buy them illegally on the street? Were they stolen? That answer is still unclear. But the fact that it happened at all speaks volumes. Because even with laws on the books, enforcement lags. Oversight cracks. Background checks are only as good as the information fed into them. And for someone like Thompson, who had learned to operate in the margins of the system, slipping through wasn't difficult. But access is only one part of the equation. The bigger, more uncomfortable question is this. Why was he out at all? With 5 felony convictions, including violent offenses, many are now asking, was enough done to keep this man off the streets? Were there missed opportunities to intervene, to detain, to supervise? Did someone fail to see the warning signs, or worse, choose to look away? It's a painful question, especially for those in law enforcement who continue to put themselves at risk every day. Because when the system releases a known threat back into the community, and one of their own pays the price, trust erodes. Morale suffers. And the sense of purpose that drives these officers begins to dim. Within the ranks of the Chicago police and sheriff's departments, the mood after Wordlaw's death was heavy. Not just with grief, but with frustration. Many spoke quietly, off camera, about what they called the revolving door. The reality that they arrest, the courts release, and too often, they bury their own. And for officers still working the streets, the message is chilling. Even doing everything right might not be enough. Rafael Wordlaw was trained. Alert. Armed. And still, he was ambushed and outgunned. If it could happen to him, who's really safe? In moments like this, we're forced to ask a hard, national question. Are we doing enough to protect those who protect us? Because if the people we ask to stand between danger and the public can't rely on the system behind them, then what are we really asking of them? The story of Deputy Wordlaw isn't just about the man who pulled the trigger, it's about every crack that led to that moment. Every policy, every oversight, every delay that allowed a violent, repeat offender to carry out an act of pure destruction. And until those cracks are closed, it may happen again. Deputy Rafael Wordlaw didn't wake up on August 2nd expecting to make headlines. He wasn't chasing recognition. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was simply living the code he had chosen, to protect and serve. Even off-duty, even in an everyday moment, he carried that commitment with him. And in the face of a sudden threat, he responded. He acted. He stood his ground. He didn't hesitate. And for that, he gave his life. Wordlaw's final act wasn't defined by fear or retreat. It was marked by courage. A single shot, fired with precision under unimaginable pressure. A final, defiant stand against someone who never should have been in a position to take a life. But the legacy of Deputy Rafael Wordlaw isn't only written in how he died, it's written in how he lived. With integrity. With discipline. With a quiet strength that earned the trust of his fellow officers and the respect of the community he served. Now, his name joins a long list of law enforcement officers who made the ultimate sacrifice. But we must do more than remember him, we must ask why this happened, and how we stop it from happening again. Because behind every tragedy like this is a chain of decisions. And behind every name is a life, with people who loved them, depended on them, and now mourn them. So we ask you, the viewer, to think deeply. What needs to change to prevent tragedies like this? What does justice mean when those sworn to uphold it are the ones under fire? And how do we make sure the system we trust to keep us safe does the same for those who serve within it? If you found this story important, if it gave you something to think about, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with others, and subscribing to the channel for more true stories that matter. Your voice, your thoughts, and your support help keep these stories alive. And help spark the conversations we all need to be